in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast. If you're a runner, stop just measuring volume. A lot of the times we as runners have heard that training volume, so just mileage, is the key to getting better. But what we see in the research, and I think this is kind of like a misnomer, is that training volume is the most important for physiological adaptations. But what they don't tell you in the research is that this training volume is actually a load marker. So it takes into account both the amount of time that you're training, how often you're training, and the intensity that you're training at. Welcome to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. If you would have asked me 1 year ago if I would ever race again, my response would have been, I would just like to be healthy and not feel like my body is failing me. At that time, I had really bad chronic hip and back pain. My Achilles would flare up even if I thought about running too much and too fast. And I'm not talking about, 30 or 40 miles a week. Oh, I can't handle that sort of stuff. I'm talking like 5 to 10 minutes per session. So if I ran 5 to 10 minutes per session, once to 3 times a week, sometimes my Achilles would actually start to hurt even more. And fast forward to present day, and I just strung together 6 months of consistent training, probably some of the most consistency I've actually ever had in training, other than when I was training in junior college. And I was able to finish my first big race in 2 years called the Tiger Claw Ascent. It's a brutal 2.5 mile, so probably just over 2.5 miles. And there's 2,500 feet of gain within the race because you're literally just racing up a mountain. I ended up finishing 11th overall, and I just looked, and I'll show you this later, at my intervals.icu account, and my maximum mileage during training building up was 17 miles in a single week. I then followed that up a week later with a 12th place finish at a local trail race here in Bend, Oregon. That was 5 miles long. So this is like another, kind of huge milestone for me. I hadn't raced anything longer than the 2.5 miles in 2 years. And I did this 5 mile race, and I was able to average 6:30 pace. So I think it was closer to like 6:31, but 6:30 pace. And that was just something that was like extremely encouraging to me. So the big question is what did I do to get there? Going from, super injured, chronic back injuries, hip injuries, just thinking about training, would make my Achilles hurt, to being able to finish, and not only finish, but compete in 2 races in the course of, a little under 2 weeks. So in this episode, I'm going to give a quick race recap for both of those races, and then a breakdown of what I did for my training in the 6 months leading up to the race to actually get there. So let's get started. So I want to start, before we go into a race recap, I just want to start with where I was at before racing was even on my radar. My problem is that 7 or 8 months ago, I felt like I was spinning my wheels. I would start training, then I would tweak my back or my hip or my Achilles, and I really felt like I was, doing this like vicious cycle of, I'd finally feel better, and then I'd start training some more, and then I would get injured again. And, so I was really just looking for anything to help me stay healthy so I could start working more effectively, because not only were these like back injuries and hip injuries bothering me in terms of training, it was also interfering with, like my life. I was grumpy. Whenever you have a back issue, it's like anything you do can make you feel pretty irritable, and then that will extend to, like your relationships, for example, like with my partner. I wasn't able to take care of the dogs because I couldn't really go for hikes and walks and stuff like that. So I really just wanted to get my body to a point where I felt healthy enough to be able to just train consistently. And through that live a more effective and present life, because I was always thinking about, oh, well, I can't sit down for more than 30 minutes because then my back is going to hurt. Or if I do this type of movement, then my hip is going to hurt, like yard work and stuff like that. Like, forget about it. Or like the Achilles stuff, like, oh, well, I don't want to go on too far of a walk because what if my Achilles start to flare up? So the problem really started there. And I was lucky enough to have some amazing people in my life, either through the podcast, through random encounters, or just, like through local connections and stuff like that, that really helped me with some of the issues that I was facing. So before we get started, with anything, I just want to give a shout out to 4 people. Coach Michelle Simmons. She has been on the podcast actually a few times, and we talked about like breathing and other things like that. But one of the things that she helped me do is I was telling her about, like my back and my hip and like those sort of things. And she introduced me to this thing called flow rope. It sounded extremely woo-woo at the time. Essentially what you're doing is you're just spinning a rope, and you're kind of, if you're watching this video, you're kind of just like mobilizing your back and your hips and other things like that. So I was just searching for solutions in terms of helping my back get better. So I started doing that for 5 to 10 minutes before each workout that I would do. And I've kept it in my workouts because I do think it's helped with the mobilization of, all parts of my spine, my hips, like that sort of stuff. So it kind of gets me warmed up. And it's also, I think, in a sense, like lubricated the joints, the hips, the back, like those sort of things. So now I can handle a little more of that movement. Number 2, I want to thank Coach Dave Shell. He is one of the friends of the podcast. He's been a co-host on the podcast numerous times, and he really helped me dial in my training early on, because one of the issues that I ran into is that my ego is too big, and I always plan more exercise than I really am capable of. For example, like I brought my training plan to him, and he really helped me to actually dial in. He was like, well, if you're going to be running and cycling, every other day, because at first, I was like, I can't run every day. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to do run, bike, hike, bike, run. So, that was kind of like the way that I was going to set things up. And he told me, he was like, with the way you have things set up, so Monday was going to be a hard workout, then I was going to take it off, and then I was going to do another hardish workout or something like that. And he was like, well, why don't you concentrate the hard work on Monday and Tuesday, do a hard run, hard hike, follow that up with a hard bike, and then allow for 2 days of recovery before you do something like a threshold workout or something on Friday. So he really helps to put that into perspective for me, where it's really amazing. Like, you could do a hard run one day and your legs are going to feel a little bit tired, but because biking is an unloaded sort of sport, you can actually come back and do something hard the next day. So it's a really, really potent stimulus for adaptation. And it really helped me kind of go from, I think, like 350 watts for 5 minutes to 403 watts for 5 minutes. That was the last test that I did. And on top of that, I built my running fitness a whole heck of a lot faster because I was also developing my physiology on the bike. So Dave was a huge help with that. Number 3, I want to thank my really good friend, Kasha Kilojanic. She's a PT. She was local. She's since moved up to Washington, unfortunately. But if you're in Washington, you should shout her out, because she's awesome. And if you need some PT work, but she gave me some exercises in terms of like hip mobility and rotational stuff with my hip, because she had also been dealing with a torn hip labrum. So my injuries were essentially a herniated disc in my back, a torn hip labrum, and then, something going on with my Achilles, which I'm still trying to figure out. But she really helped me with like the hip stuff and putting it through full range of motion, and, as long as it's not hurting, and then giving me recommendations for things like strength training and the types of work I could do with strength training that wouldn't exacerbate the injury, but would allow me to get stronger in the process of actually training as well. And then this is a really short list of a lot of people who have helped me. But number 4, I want to thank Robbie Wade. He is the CEO of Rhythm Health, and Rhythm is a blood work company where essentially they send you a kit. And this kit, what it allows you to do is it allows you to, if you've seen it on my Instagram, you just like place this thing on your arm and you click a button, and then you can draw blood and you can do blood work basically from your home. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to track your blood markers monthly to see how things like sleep and training and stress are all affecting your blood chemistry. And this was a huge game changer for me because when I first started getting these tests, like this is like right before I started training consistently or trying to, I had low vitamin D, which was most likely leading to low testosterone. And at the same time, this was also probably contributing to the poor sleep quality that I would get. Before, kind of fixing my blood chemistry, my deep sleep was, somewhere around like 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And now I'm consistently getting an hour and a half to like of deep sleep, which I know that, like with the Aura Ring and those sort of things, it's not the most accurate in terms of deep sleep. But if it's tracking the same way every single day, that's an indicator that I've essentially doubled my restorative deep sleep time. And that's also going to contribute to my ability to take on more volume and more stress. So this was a really, really huge game changer for me. And if you have any sort of like potential challenges with sleep or recovery or other things like that, chances are that there could be some underlying issues going on. And this is like an ad for Rhythm Health, but I really believe in the product. But for like $100 a month or something like that, you can do these monthly blood tests. And you can even, if you want to do like once every other month, you could like skip a day or like anything like that. So if you're interested in doing, kind of learning more about Rhythm or getting started with it, I'll put a link down in the description and you can just read all about it. Because it truly has been a game changer for me. And what they do is they look at markers like, just like a regular lipid panel. They'll also look at vitamin D, testosterone, ferritin levels, like T3 levels, like all of these things that if you went to the doctor, they probably wouldn't recommend it to you at first go about. So you have the ability now to not only not have to go into a lab and get your blood drawn, you can just do it at home and it gets delivered to your door. You also have the ability to look at things that are actually pretty important for performance. And if they are lacking, you can change your exercise, your stress management, your sleep, your nutrition, like those sort of things in response to it. So as opposed to waiting 6 months or to a year between, times you get your blood work done, you can be proactive about it. So that all things being said, that has been a huge game changer for me. So really to recap, kind of like the before thing, I was really suffering from major challenges with my training, and these were because of my overall health from acute injuries that I had with the disc herniation, the torn labrum in my hip, and the chronic Achilles issues, which I'm still kind of trying to manage and mitigate. I simply couldn't put together much consistent training because these underlying issues. And I think really all 4 of these people from, Michelle with the flow rope, Dave helping me with the training load and the consistency with training, Kasha helping me with like the strength training side of things, and then Robbie in Rhythm Health helping me kind of uncover some things with the blood work. I think all of these have really, really contributed to my ability to actually train now for actually like 7 months consistently. So altogether, yeah, I was in a bad place, and I've been able to kind of dig myself out of that hole, and all of that culminated with me racing the Tiger Claw Ascent. Like I said, it's a 2.5 mile race with 2,500 feet of gain, so it's steep, and I didn't realize how steep it was going to be. Like I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't realize how steep it was going to be until I was getting, I was about like 3/4 of the way done with the race, and it was straight up and down to the point where I was actually like putting my hands down. and like, kind of climbing, the actual trail. But this race was awesome. So it was held up in Washington, and huge shout out to Ethan Newberry. He's the ginger runner. He puts he's put this race on. So the Tiger Claw race weekend is the Tiger Claw Ascent on Friday afternoon, and then the actual Tiger Claw race, which is like, it's like a 3-loop ultra marathon. I think it's 50K, where you pick the different loops you want to do and what order you want to do them in. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure race. And then of course you can do like the Big Cat, which is the Ascent and the Tiger Claw, which you would do Friday and then you would do Saturday morning. But it was an amazing race. I wanted to support him because he has really been a big motivator and inspiration for me with all of like the documentaries and videos and other things like that he's put out. And I knew that if I was able to string together some consistent training, this was going to be the race I wanted to do. So I had been kind of consistently training for like 2 or 3 months at the time. And then I realized that the registration for the Tiger Claw Ascent was coming out. So I registered for it like in January or something along those lines. And then things kind of got real because I was like, oh crap, now I actually have to like train for something. And just to put it into perspective, the race I knew was going to be anywhere from like 30 to 45 minutes in length, which means that I didn't have to do a ton of volume in terms of my training because I'm still a little hesitant to really up my running volume. But I was like, okay, well, with the time available for myself and all of these sort of things, I could probably manage to do a 30 to 45 minute race. So just for the race recap, we get there, or we drove up on Friday morning, which was the day of the race. And throughout the morning and it was like 5-6 hours away from our house. I was really focusing on fueling appropriately. So I was eating, kind of like higher carbohydrate, lower fiber, lower fat, sort of meals throughout the day just to make sure I was like well fueled. And I was also a little worried because it was supposed to be sunny up near the Seattle area, which is a little weird for this time of year, and a little warm. And I hadn't really done a ton of work, like training outside in the heat, just because normally I train during the day. But I was a little worried, so I was hydrating and doing all that sort of stuff. We took, the entire crew, 4 dogs. We actually brought our cat, and then my fiance came along with us, and then Kasha, the PT I mentioned earlier, and then Jake met us at the race. And the race didn't start till 6 p.m. So it was kind of one of those things where, normally races start early in the morning, and I'm really good at dialing in my nutrition for a morning workout. So this is one of those, a little bit of a question mark in terms of the nutrition and how my stomach would feel and other things like that going into the race. But I had practiced it the week before, and it went really well because I was doing, some race simulations, which we'll talk about later. But so we get to the race probably around like 3 p.m. Races at 6 p.m., something along those lines. So I had some time to just kind of like mess around, talk to friends and hang out. And I had a really good conversation actually with the race director, Ethan Newberry, which was awesome. Like I wasn't expecting that to happen, but it was really cool to get to connect with him. And then, about an hour out, I actually took some pre-workout. It's just something that kind of like would get me into the mindset and help me stay hydrated. So I took some pre-workout, and then I just did my normal warm-up. So that warm-up typically consists of 5 minutes, pretty easy, either jogging or riding my bike. In this case, it was jogging, and then a little bit harder for the next 5 minutes of jogging. And I kind of did like a little bit of a course recon just to see what was going to happen to me, because I had never seen the course. But I had practiced it on my treadmill. And then I did a couple accelerations. So I wear the Moxie monitor for all of my training. And one of the biggest differences in my training that the Moxie has really made is the ability to monitor my warm-up status. So what I'm looking for during that kind of early those early stages, the 5 minutes and then the other 5 minutes, is that SMO2, so skeletal muscle oxygenation, and heart rate are kind of rising linearly and pretty slowly. And then when I'm done with that first 10 minutes of just warming up, I take a break. And then I do like a 20-second acceleration where I'm watching SMO2 go down and then start to reach a little bit of a plateau. And once it reaches that plateau, I slow down, walk, and then allow SMO2 to come back to a high point. And then I do that again, and I essentially repeat that until SMO2 has reached a high point twice in a row. And that's really when I know that my body is really ready to actually go and do whatever it is I'm supposed to do, whether it's an easy workout or a hard workout. I do the same warm up every single day. So we did that, got a little bit of the jitters. And I always say this is like, don't do anything new on race day. But the only thing different that I did is I had like a running belt that I was thinking about wearing. So I didn't take that. I just had my water bottle, and then I put my phone in the little pocket on my compression shorts that I was running with. And then, of course, I had my bucket hat. And then I had a really nice, like not sun shirt, but like UV proof, sort of like hiking shirt that was like super, super lightweight, that I wore as well. And I had some headphones. And that was the extent of it. So, and then I also had obviously my watch, my heart rate monitor, my Moxie monitor, and my power meter, the Stride power meter for my shoes for running. And I knew that the race was probably going to be, I had kind of dialed in around like 35, 36 minutes. In terms of my race simulations I was doing on my treadmill. And, so we're waiting there. I was kind of talking to some of the guys, seeing what people, were thinking in terms of time and other things like that. And, the gun goes off, and it's actually like the race started, and it's pretty much just downhill for, I don't know, a quarter of a mile. And then it kind of creeps uphill a little bit for another quarter of a mile. And then you're just into the super steep, like 20 to 40% grade the entire time. And I probably cooked it a little bit too fast in the very beginning just to try to get, kind of like a hole shot so people wouldn't be in my way during the actual ascent. But what happened was, a few people held back, and then they immediately passed me and, going up the first hill because I was power hiking the entire time. I didn't feel confident that my heart rate would just like go through the roof, and I'd essentially hit VO2 max if I was running the entire time. So I was power hiking the entire time. And that was a really, really good decision, where I wish I was able to run, but I just didn't have the fitness to be able to do it this time. So next year I'm going to really put in a lot of work trying to, get good at running uphill as opposed to just power hiking, because there are some limitations to how fast you can actually walk versus how fast you can run. And all the people that beat me were running the entire time. So, we got, probably like halfway through, and, there was like some people that like I had to make some moves to like, get around and use a little bit more energy than I was expecting. And I was really trying to pace myself with heart rate during this race, because I knew that if I modulated my heart rate well, then I would be able to actually, kind of like maximize my performance here. So I was targeting 164 to 168 beats per minute. But because of like, like the excitement of the race, probably the race being later in the day, just the sheer adrenaline that was going on, my heart rate never went below 170, which was way higher than anything that I had, kind of experienced. So I was a little worried about that in the beginning, but I was like, you know what? I'm feeling pretty good. We're just gonna keep the pedal to the metal, keep pushing as hard as we can. So that's essentially what I did. And then, getting probably like 3/4 of the way up, there were a couple guys, kind of off in the distance, like maybe 50 to 100 meters ahead of me, where I was like, okay, let's like put our heads down and like, start to try to snipe them. And the cool thing about this race is that it gets to you essentially get to the top of this like cable line trail that's just like super, super steep. and it opens up and you see kind of like Seattle and the Puget Sound and like all of those sort of things. And you just get this wonderful view. And then what you have to do is you actually go downhill and then you wind your way back up to the second peak. So you go like, it's like Tiger Claw 3, which is one of the peaks. And then you go down and then you start coming back up and then you get up to like Tiger Claw 2 or something like that. I'm probably messing up the names, but so I knew exactly how far away these guys were, and they were essentially neck and neck. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to catch these guys. So I was pushing with everything I had at the end of this race to try to get to these guys. And I think I just didn't quite have it in me. So they beat me by, I think, like 15, 20 seconds, something along those lines. But I was able to finish the race in 26 minutes. No, not 26, 36 minutes. And like, I think I had 18 seconds, but like the actual clock time was like 23 seconds or something along those lines, which any other year, because this race is pretty young, would have been, top 10, maybe like top 5, depending on the year. But because there was actually more, like the race is getting more popular and there's more, talent that was actually in the race, I wound up 11th out of, I think like 65 registered or something like that, which I'm still really, really happy with. Anything under 40, I was going to be really proud of myself for the race effort and those sort of things. And, it just felt really good getting up to the top. My fiance was there with our 4 dogs, cheering me on and all of that. So that really meant a lot to me. Just completing the race and like knowing that my body can actually still do races was like a really, really huge win for me, because like I said, if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have been like, no, I just want to get healthy. I don't think I'll ever race again. Honestly, that's what I was thinking. I was like, I will never race again because, it's not worth the mental stress and strain. But overall, like the race went really, really well. I was really, really happy, with like the outcome. And the amazing thing, or the cool thing is that actually gave me confidence to sign up for the local trail race that I did essentially a week after. And I went there and was like, okay, well, we're going to see, how well I'm going to do. Cause I was training primarily for hills, during this entire buildup. And this race was completely flat, like 5 miles and on trails. And I was able to get like 12th or something like that out of like 110. So I'm really happy with everything that has gone on lately. And my fitness is, probably from a running perspective as high as it's been in years. So overall, this is just like an amazing experience. So the next thing I want to talk about though is, it's like, is how did I get there? What did I do to go from, overtraining kind of even at low volumes and kind of, chasing, more of like workouts versus like workouts and exercise versus training, and not really focusing on, say recovery. So the overall, like the major shifts that I made is that I reduced my running and my expectations for running to 2 to 3 times per week. There was just simply no way that my body was going to be able to handle running any more than that. And it actually worked really, really well, because on the other days, the days where I wasn't running, I was doing cross training on the bike. So I was able to kind of go back and forth and not get too much, say, concentrated stress from one movement pattern with running or biking. I was going back and forth. And I think that really helped to keep me healthy, because if I rode my bike too much, then my lower back would hurt. If I ran too much, my Achilles would hurt. So it was this like constant balance of trying to make sure I didn't overdo it in one or the other. I also, if you've listened to the previous solo podcast, I used a lot of physiological testing to guide my intensities. And this again was like another huge game changer in terms of like my approach to training. I did something along the lines of like, like a physiological or a VO2 max test or a VO2 max testing week, every 6 to 7 weeks, 5 to 7 weeks, during the initial stages. So I think like from, I think it was from, like October, November, December, I was doing, every 6 weeks I was doing testing where I would do a performance test on the bike. So 5 minutes all out. I would do some sort of performance test with running. I didn't do that in the beginning because I wasn't confident enough in my running. And then I would do a 3-1 assessment for like limiters to assess if my pulmonary system, my cardiac system, or my muscular system was most limiting my training or my performance. And then I would do something where I would do like a running or it was a running VO2 max test. So I would start, or it was really slow, but I would do like a lot of incline. So I would do 5 miles an hour on the treadmill, and then I would just go up 2% every stage. And that really helped me dial in both the training intensities that I need to do for running and for cycling at the same time, and knowing what my biggest limiters were for both of those sports. I also did some strength training 2 times a week. It wasn't heavy or anything like that, again, because of like my injuries. And sometimes, like, because I preach on my Instagram a lot, oh, you got to do heavy strength training if you're a runner or a cyclist, if you want to, really maximize your performance. So from some perspective, I feel like a little bit of a fraud because I only really could do body weight sort of stuff. And I'm still really in kind of doing just the body weight sort of style stuff with my strength training, but that's all my body could handle. If I tried to do any sort of, deadlifting or squatting or anything like that, it was really, really, I was riding a thin line between, disaster and getting really injured again and being okay. So it wasn't worth it to me. So I did, like kind of a lot of lower body stuff, like lots of lunges, body weight squats, those sort of things. And then I also maintained upper body strength by doing push-ups, pull-ups, and essentially that was about it. But I do think that definitely helped kind of make me a little bit more bulletproof in terms of my training and able to accumulate more volume. Then of course, I prioritize sleep. It's always been a priority for me just because it helps me feel a lot better during the day, during the work day, cope with, like the stress of work and life and training and all of that sort of stuff. I really focused on fueling. So I started out when I was first training a lot, I was eating, it was carbohydrates and fueling all day, every day. I was really making sure that I wasn't trying to lose any weight. I was trying to maintain my weight and up my performance. And that really helped. And that really, it was really crazy. Like my performance kept going up, and I actually, was slowly gaining a little bit of weight. So I think it was a little bit of muscle, but then also I felt like I was gaining a little bit of, extra adipose tissue as well. So I did finally get to a point where I was like, okay, like I'm kind of feeling like I'm, heavy. So I started to dial in my nutrition and my feeling a little bit better. And that actually helped me, feel a little bit better for race day. I didn't lose any crazy weight or anything like that, but it was one of those things where, in the beginning I was just like, I don't want to get injured. So I need to provide the correct fuel and the correct nutrition for myself. And then once I started to be consistent and feeling really good, then I started to modulate just ever so slightly the amount of calories that I was eating for better body composition. And I was prioritizing carbs and proteins for the recovery aspect of this. And the biggest thing is that I was really able to stay consistent. And another thing that I want to add here is that if I was ever feeling like my Achilles was hurting, my lower back was hurting, like something along those lines, I would not do a hard workout that day. I would either, you've probably seen me, with like the vest on, hiking and doing those sort of things. And a lot of that was so I didn't overdo it. The vest makes it so I can't run on the trails. So that was just recognizing when my body was kind of feeling like I was maybe overdoing it or going too far. I would take a step back. I wouldn't do a hard workout. I would delay that hard workout either till the next week or to the next day. And that really helped me stay consistent. So the really big takeaways, and we're slowly paring things down. The really big takeaways for me is that more isn't always better. Like I said, I did a maximum of like 17 miles of running, max. Like that was like peak week, 17 miles max. I was doing volume from the perspective of like being on the bike and training, 5 to 7 hours a week. But a lot of it was unloaded. And I think that really, really helped me because the unloading definitely made it so I was able to recover between hard runs. And that was the key there, is I knew that because I was going to be racing for 30 to 45 minutes, I needed to get to a point where I was able to accumulate that amount of intensity and then recover really hard from it. And then, try to do it again, during the week. So that was my biggest priority. I needed to do, or I was really prioritizing 1 to 2, or really it was 2 interval training sessions running per week towards the end of my training. I was prioritizing the strength training because that helped me feel better in terms of my, just overall, like strength and other things like that. And I felt like I was a little less prone to injury by doing this strength training. And then I would fill in the rest of the time I had training with those easy workouts. So easy riding, some hard riding sometimes, like easy hiking. So not even running, like easy hiking. And then, like another kind of zone 2 day throughout the week. So the big benefit of all of this is that I was also able to, and then something else I want to talk about is how I was gauging intensity. So I was doing all of this physiology testing, and that gave me kind of the peace of mind to be like, okay, here's the target heart rate, here's the target pace for today, and don't go over that. So it was kind of acting as like a governor in terms of, yeah, you're not allowed to go higher than this heart rate for the day. And that really led to a lot of, kind of mental and emotional freedom, because I knew exactly what the effort should be. And, if I had been using pace or something like that, there probably would have been times where I would have tried to push a little bit harder. So especially on the runs, that was really what I was targeting, was like my target heart rate. And, it really helped to make sure that I was not overdoing it. So that's kind of a big, like a massive overview of like kind of what I did, but what did I actually do for training? So I want to share my actual training with everybody. So if you're on, or if you're just listening to this on Spotify, then you may not be able to see what my actual training was. If you're on YouTube, or if you're on the Spotify video, then you'll be able to see what sort of training I was actually doing. And actually, before I actually go into the training here, show you the different tests that I was doing and kind of what I was gathering from them. So I already went over this in the first solo podcast episode, where I started my testing kind of in October. Then I did another test in November, and then I did another test in December, and then I waited, probably about 8 weeks or I guess this would be 6 weeks to do my kind of final physiological testing on the week of the 17th of February. And I started this week out by doing a 5-minute, 20-minute critical power test. And I was able to do the 5-minute critical power test, like 5-minute time trial, at 403 watts, which was up to this point, it was a PR by 1 watt, essentially. Like, I was really aiming for over 400 watts, and that was a huge, boost in my performance and my confidence that I actually had. So I did that, and then I was supposed to do 20 minutes all out on the bike. And I was really only able to do it for 10 minutes, and I averaged 302 watts. And this really indicated to me that it was time to start doing more threshold work. Because my VO2 max at this point, was anywhere between I don't know, 70 and 80 according to the VO2 master that I was using. And my VO2 max like pace and performance was going up a lot. For example, I also like the next day I followed that up with a hill, essentially on the treadmill. I was trying to gain 500 feet as fast as possible. And I did that in 5 minutes, which is the equivalent to doing the hill in my backyard in 3:49. So I knew that like my top end speed was really, really strong, and my VO2 max, sort of like power was really, really high. However, what I was identifying was that my second threshold wasn't up to par yet. So I knew that going into like after this February 17th, sort of like assessment, I knew that I needed to start doing more threshold work. And at this point, I knew that my zone 2 was around 140 beats per minute for running, and my second threshold was probably 160 to 163. And that was just based off of like the testing that I was doing. So that's kind of where I was at. And that was like the last real big physiological test that I was doing, because I had to send my VO2 master back in for, some yearly maintenance and normal maintenance stuff and other things like that. And, so I didn't do any like true physiological testing, but what I did do starting, kind of February, if we can actually look at my workouts here, is I started to actually do more. You see how it says run threshold workout up the hill. I started to do these threshold workouts, and then what I would do is Monday I would do a run threshold workout up the hill. So it was more like a hiking threshold workout. And then I would follow that up with a biking threshold workout. Then I would have zone 2 work on Wednesday and Thursday, whether that was running, like this one's cross country skiing, or cycling. And then on Fridays, I would do a true threshold run workout on the treadmill. So for the next like few weeks, I did something along those lines, where I was building up this run threshold where I would go up and down the hill at 160 to 164. You can see 162 beats per minute here. And I was building that up. I think this was 5, and I was still at 5 here because I had to, I don't know why I decided to do that on Sunday, but I was also, pairing with these longer threshold bikes. They were 2-to-1 work rest ratios. So I would start pretty hard. Let's just go zoom in on this. I would start pretty hard. So I would ride at 400 watts, and then I would dial that down to about 300 watts for the next 8 minutes. And then I would do 4 minutes rest, and then I would repeat that. So these were longer, like hybrid VO2 max threshold workouts. And you can see with my SMO2 trace, SMO2 goes way down during the hard start intervals, and then it kind of comes back up, and then over the course of 8 minutes, it trickles back down. So I was definitely above my second threshold when I was like doing these, but the whole point was to start to try to accumulate more volume at a little bit slower intensities, but longer durations, as opposed to the VO2 max work that I had done. So now if we, just sort of look at the types of workouts, that I was doing over time, if this loads, oh, come on. There we go. You can see I kept, kind of this style of, hill workout, bike threshold workout, threshold-esque workout, where I was like practicing pretty steep treadmill inclines and speeds for, until like through the end of February, essentially. And then I took a down week here. Anytime that I noticed that I was getting a little tired, feeling a little lethargic, whatever it was, I would take a down week where I would go easy for 4 days. And this was a big help from Dave Schell, because this is kind of his approach or his recommendation. And then I would bring it back on Fridays with, some workout. So this one was a longer tempo workout where I was doing, I think, like 5 minutes on, 1 minute off, or 6 minutes on, one. Oh, here it is. 5 by 8 minutes on, 1 minute off. So I was doing something along those lines. And then this is where my training really shifted. So this was the beginning of April, and I had about a month left until my race. So I was like, okay, well, what I need to do is I need to be accumulating a lot of this threshold work, and I need to be doing a race simulation each week. So I started building up. This was 1, 2, 3. This was 7. So 7 loops up and down my hill, trying to accumulate as much gain as I possibly could. And then I would have, like, this was actually like 2 bike rides in a row, or it was like an easy hike, and then it was a zone 2 bike ride. So I was really trying to make sure that I was putting in really high quality work with some strength stuff on Tuesdays, and then high quality work with some strength stuff on Fridays. And these Fridays, like I said, were they changed from this type of workout where I was doing 8 minutes on, 1 minute off to, more of a continuous race simulation. And you can see here, right? Like I was running and my heart rate was building, and then I was actually going pretty slow. And the reason why I was going slow is because I was going up an incline that was like, I think it was like 30% or something like that. Cause I knew I needed to practice that. Because that is 32% actually, because that is really, really steep, and practicing that was really valuable for my actual build up to the race. So I continued that for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then I knew I had the race. So I just kept kind of going a little bit longer and a little bit harder on my threshold workouts up the hill. So I got up to 7 loops, and then I would do my race simulation pretty hard. And then I got up to 8 loops. This was my peak week. I got up to eight loops. This was that 17 miles. But I also, was doing 5,324 feet of gain this week. And I was doing around 7 hours of training. So maximally, I was doing about 7 hours of training. I was doing, these 8 loops, and then I was doing these race simulations. And what I would do, because my treadmill goes up to 40%, is I literally had the GPX file printed out on my computer, and then I broke it into segments. So on my treadmill, I literally had, okay, for segment 1, you have to be at this percent or this percent for this distance. And then I would try each week to do better and better and better. And then leading into race week, I did, just 3 loops on the hill, and, then went and did the race. And we can do a quick little audit, of the actual race here. But you can see, like heart rate almost immediately up to 170, spikes or peaks at about 176. And then it's kind of just sticking around, 170, 172 the entire time. I went downhill right here, so that's why we see a little bit of a drop. And then, going up to the very, very end, it was 174. So, and you can also see with my SMO2, SMO2 went down, and then it just stayed real low the entire time. So like 30%. And this gave me an indication that I was, kind of in the right ballpark in terms of the intensity that I was aiming for. And you can see here, this is just like the altitude or the elevation. It was, really, 2,000 plus feet of gain, or 2,500 feet of gain over the course of the actual race. So overall, this race was, absolutely awesome. I loved it, and it's something that I am definitely looking forward to. I really like training for races that are anywhere between probably like 30 and 90 minutes, because I have enough time to actually train for it and train effectively for it. And I don't feel like I have to accumulate tons and tons of volume for it. So that's why I, was able to be around, say, 7 hours, 17 miles worth of running, even though my gain was really, really high. But the way that I actually trained for it is I started in the beginning of my training block. I had identified that I wanted to improve my VO2 max. So I started with a lot of VO2 max intervals, a lot of, kind of like higher intensity, shorter work, like 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, like those sort of things. And then as I got closer to my race, you saw the pretty stark transition after I was like, okay, well, now I need to actually get my second threshold, sustainability and speed higher. So what I did was I went from the VO2 max style stuff to longer, more sustained efforts, like up the hill in my backyard, which is like 400 feet of gain. So it's not a hill. It's pretty steep, and but then what I would do is I would extend the actual route that I was doing. So I would go a little bit longer, and then but I would keep that sustained pace of 160 to 164 beats per minute and try not to go over that. And then I would do the race simulation going into it, because I know from experience with my cross country athletes and other athletes that I've trained in the past that doing like a hard workout early in the week and then doing like a race simulation is actually a really, really good way of honing the edge of the sword, so you actually get good at whatever race you're doing. And granted, you can't do this if you're doing a half marathon, a marathon, anything above like a half marathon. Actually, probably anything above a 10K, you probably can't really just go and do like a race simulation. But what you can do is you can do more specific work. So if you were doing a 10K or a half marathon, you would start to incorporate half marathon style intervals into your long run, for example. And then progressing those as you go. So I went from, 5 hill threshold repeats to 6, then 7, then 8. And I also kept a little bit of VO2 max work in there as well. The very beginning of all of those hill workouts, I would do 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And I think that was able to keep that VO2 max that I had developed and built throughout the, 6 months of training prior to that. So, that's essentially, how I trained for that uphill race. And what's next? There's another uphill race that's actually kind of close to me. It's at Mount Hoodoo, which is a ski resort in Central Oregon. And there's like a 5K that I am really looking forward to. It's like 5K and 1,500 feet of gain, or 1,100 feet of gain, of something like that. And I'm going to go, it's in July, and I'm going to go and I'm going to race it to the best of my ability. And yeah, I think this whole experience has really been eye-opening for me from the perspective of, I don't need to run every single day in order to actually get kind of the most out of my training. The biking really, really helped because it allowed my recovery days to be truly recovery. The biking also helped me develop my physiology early on in the season when my running performance and physiology wasn't really there. And now I'm primarily doing running. So 3 days of running and 2 days of strength training, with those 2 days of strength training being completely off from cardiovascular activity. And I've been finding that I, am still sharpening, the edge of the sword even more. So look for more updates in terms of, like next races, how my different approaches are going. I'm also working on some like gut health things, and really still honing in like my blood work, and trying to heal my back and my hip and my Achilles, because if I'm able to do that, then I'll be able to, then take on more volume if time allows, but also just take on, more training load. And that's something just really quick I want to make a differentiation between, is a lot of the times we as runners have heard that training volume, so just mileage, is the key to getting better. But what we see in the research And I think this is kind of like a misnomer, is that training volume is the most important for physiological adaptations. But what they don't tell you in the research is that this training volume is actually a load marker. So it takes into account both the amount of time that you're training, how often you're training, and the intensity that you're training at. So if I could leave you with one really, really big tip, if you're a runner, stop just measuring volume. And what I mean by that, if you're a runner, stop just measuring mileage. What you really need to do is you need to take into account both the mileage, how often you're doing that, and the intensity at which you are doing that distance at. So you could make a simple switch from going from just mileage to doing something like multiplying your mileage by your heart rate and then using that number and tracking that number over time. And I think that would make a huge difference for a lot of people to not overtrain, because when you're doing intensity, when you're doing higher intensity stuff, it's inherently more training load for less time, or the same training load for less time. So you need to keep that in mind going forward, is that it's not just about mileage. It's about how fast you're also doing that mileage. So you need to take into account the amount of mileage or the volume and the intensity that you're doing it at. All right. With that, if you have any questions on this episode, you can find me at Dr. Phil Batterson on Instagram. I've recently changed my Instagram handle, so it's no longer Critical Oxygen. It's no longer Critical O2. It's at Dr. Phil Batterson. So reach out to me there if you have any questions. I'm also a coach. So if you didn't know that, I am a trail running coach. And I have, a number of different athletes who, range from moderately trained individuals to amateurs to elite level individuals. And I'm not just a trail running coach. I'm primarily a trail running coach, but I'm an endurance coach. So I coach everybody from surf skiers, which is like open water kayaking, to mountain bikers, to people who are doing road running races, to people who are mountaineers. So if you are interested or want to know more about my coaching, just shoot me a DM on Instagram. Let me know, hey, I was listening to you on the podcast and I'd be interested in knowing, how your coaching works. I'd be more than happy to, talk to you about it and see if we'd be a good fit. So reach out to me on there or on Instagram. If you have any questions, just let me know. And if you have any topics you want me to discuss, let me know as well. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode all about how I actually was able to do my first race in 2 years. It was an incredible journey for me, and I learned a lot. So I hope I was able to give you, some information and some tips on all the things that I learned over the course of this journey. I'm going to keep training for, more fun stuff because I really love it. This is something that I'm extremely passionate about. It's why I got into running in the first place. So I'm planning on continuing to do that stuff, and I will come out with more solo episodes recapping all the things that I am doing, what's working for me, what's not working for me, and all of that. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.